The thing in the corner of Daniel Reeves's hospital room didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't make a sound. But it watched. Always watched. At first he thought it was a trick of the morphine, the heavy-duty stuff they'd given him after the accident had left him with enough broken bones to keep an orthopedic surgeon employed for months. Shadows played differently in hospital rooms at 3 a.m., he told himself. The streetlight filtering through the vertical blinds created odd shapes. The IV pole cast strange silhouettes. His brain, fogged by pain medication and trauma, was filling in blanks that didn't exist. But the shadow in the northeast corner wasn't shaped like an IV pole. It wasn't the outline of medical equipment or the distorted reflection of the visitor's chair. It was person-shaped. Tall, unnaturally still, with a head that tilted at an angle no living neck should manage. Daniel had been staring at it for 17 minutes. He knew because the clock on the wall ticked loud enough to count, and he'd been counting to keep from screaming. The figure didn't blink because it had no eyes he could see. Didn't shift its weight because it had no weight to shift. It simply existed in that corner, a deeper darkness against the dark present, in a way that made Daniel's lizard brain shriek warnings his conscious mind couldn't fully process. He'd pressed the call button 3 times. The night nurse hadn't come. The silence in the hallway beyond his door was absolute, which was wrong. Hospitals were never silent. Even at 3 a.m., there should be sounds. Footsteps, distant monitors, the hum of fluorescent lights. But there was nothing. Just Daniel, his racing heart, and the thing that watched from the corner. "Please," he whispered to the empty room. "Someone. Anyone." The shadow's head tilted further, impossibly further, until it was nearly perpendicular to its shoulders. And then, for the first time since Daniel had noticed it, the thing moved. Welcome back to the channel. Before we get into this one, I need to ask you something important. Are you alone right now? Are there corners in the room where you're watching this that you can't quite see into? Because this story is about what happens when you finally notice what's been watching you all along. About the moment you realize some things have patience we can't comprehend. Some things can wait in corners for years, decades, lifetimes, just watching, waiting. Hit that like button. Subscribe for more true horror. And whatever you do, don't look at the corner behind you. Not yet. Daniel Reeves checked into Mercy General Hospital on October 12, 2019. He never checked out. This is what happened in room 447. 3 days earlier, Daniel Reeves had been a normal 34-year-old software developer living in Portland, Oregon. He had a 1-bedroom apartment in the Pearl District, a decent job at a startup that was always 6 months away from either explosive success or catastrophic failure, and a cat named Algorithm who tolerated his existence in exchange for premium wet food twice daily. His life wasn't exciting, but it was his. Quiet mornings with coffee and coding, long afternoons debugging other people's mistakes, evenings spent either at the climbing gym or playing video games with his college roommate who'd moved to Austin. The accident happened on a Tuesday during his lunch break. Daniel had been crossing Burnside Street earbuds in thinking about a particularly nasty bug in the authentication system he'd been chasing all morning. He had the walk signal. He was in the crosswalk. He was doing everything right. The driver who ran the red light was doing everything wrong, A 2015 Honda Civic Silver, traveling at approximately 45 miles per hour. The impact threw Daniel 30 feet. He landed on his right side, his body absorbing the concrete with the sickening crunch of multiple fractures. Fractured skull. Broken ribs, 4 on the right side, 3 on the left. Shattered right femur. Broken right wrist and ulna. Compressed vertebrae at L3 and L4. Internal bleeding. Punctured lung. The EMTs who arrived said he was lucky to be alive. The trauma surgeon who operated for 6 hours said the same thing. The orthopedic specialist who installed the various pins, plates, and rods holding Daniel's skeleton together echoed the sentiment, lucky. That's what they all said. Daniel didn't feel lucky when he woke up in the ICU. Every breath a lesson in agony. Every heartbeat a reminder that his body was now an assemblage of broken parts held together with medical-grade titanium and desperate hope. He spent 2 days in the ICU before being transferred to a regular room. Room 447 on the 4th floor of Mercy General's East Wing. A private room, one of the few perks of having decent insurance through his employer. The room was standard hospital issue. Beige walls, linoleum floor in a pattern designed to hide stains, a window that looked out over the parking garage, a flat-screen TV mounted on an articulating arm, a whiteboard where staff wrote their names and the day's care plan in dry erase marker that never quite erased completely, and corners, 4 of them, standard 90-degree angles where the walls met. Daniel noticed the northeast corner on his first night in the room, but only because that's where the shadows seemed deepest. The overhead fluorescence didn't quite reach it. The lamp on his bedside table cast light in the opposite direction. Even during the day when weak Portland autumn sunlight filtered through the window, that corner remained dim. But he didn't really notice, it didn't feel the crawling wrongness of it until the 3rd night. October 15th. The night everything changed. His parents had visited that afternoon, his mother crying the entire time, while his father made awkward small talk and checked his phone compulsively. They'd left around 6 p.m., promising to return tomorrow, their relief at leaving palpable. His co-workers had sent flowers, a massive arrangement of lilies that made the room smell like a funeral home. Daniel had asked the nurse to move them to the hallway. She'd smiled and said she understood that lots of patients didn't like the smell. Her name was Claire. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, eyes that crinkled when she smiled. She'd been his primary nurse since the transfer, checking on him every few hours, adjusting his pain medication when the screaming in his bones got too loud, talking to him about normal things, the weather, her kids, the hospital gossip, to remind him that a world existed beyond this room and his pain. She checked on him at 10 p.m., given him his medication, and promised to be back in 2 hours. That was 5 hours ago. The clock now read 3:17 a.m. and Claire hadn't returned. No one had. Daniel had pressed the call button at 11:30 when the pain medication started wearing off. Then again at midnight, at 12:45, at 1:15. No one came. He told himself it was a busy night. Emergency situations took priority. The other patients needed more urgent care. His pain was manageable, barely, but manageable. He could wait. But the silence bothered him. Hospitals weren't supposed to be silent. That's when he'd noticed the thing in the corner. The first movement was subtle. A shift in the quality of the darkness, like smoke reorganizing itself into a slightly different configuration. Daniel's breath caught. He told himself it was nothing. Shadow, morphine, trauma. His brain trying to make patterns out of random darkness, because that's what human brains did, found faces in clouds, saw meaning in static, created monsters from nothing. But the nothing was standing up. Not quickly, not with any urgency. Just a slow liquid unfolding like a flower blooming in reverse, or a body rising from deep water. The shadow that had been formless became form, became humanoid, became distinctly, terrifyingly purposeful. Daniel wanted to scream, wanted to throw something at it, to press the call button until his thumb broke to rip the IV from his arm and drag his shattered body out of this room, even if it killed him. But he couldn't move. Not paralyzed in the medical sense, his working limbs responded to his brain's commands. He could wiggle the toes on his left foot, could flex his left hand, could move his head slightly, though the pain from his fractured skull made him regret it immediately. He couldn't move because something primal in him understood that movement meant death. The same instinct that kept prey animals frozen in the grass while predators stalked past. The ancient mammalian knowledge that sometimes stillness was survival. The figure continued its slow unfolding until it reached full height. 7 feet, maybe 8. Too tall for a human, but shaped like one with arms and legs, and a head that sat at that wrong angle, cocked to the side like it was listening to something Daniel couldn't hear. It wore no clothes that Daniel could see. Wasn't naked either, just dark. An absence of light in a roughly person-shaped container. And it was looking at him. He knew this despite seeing no eyes, no face, no features at all. He could feel its attention, like pressure behind his eyeballs, like someone had reached into his skull and was gently, curiously squeezing his brain. Minutes passed. The clock ticked. Daniel's heart slammed against his broken ribs hard enough to make him gasp. The figure didn't move again, just stood there, watching. Daniel's rational mind kicked in desperately, throwing out explanations. Hallucination. Definitely a hallucination. The morphine, or the tramadol, or the combination, or the head injury. Traumatic brain injuries could cause visual disturbances. This was textbook. He'd read about it. Shadow people, sleep paralysis demons, the brain's visual cortex misfiring and creating phantom images. Except he wasn't asleep. Wasn't in that liminal space between waking and dreaming where shadow people typically appeared. He was wide awake, adrenaline burning through the fog of pain medication, every sense heightened by fear. And the thing was still there. "You're not real," Daniel whispered. The head tilted further. The movement was smooth, continuous, like it had ball-bearing joints instead of vertebrae. It tilted past 90 degrees, past where any neck should break, until the top of its head pointed toward the floor. Daniel's bladder loosened. Warm urine spread across his hospital gown and the sheets beneath him. Some distant part of him registered embarrassment, but the rest of him was too busy trying not to scream. Because the figure had raised one arm, slowly, deliberately. It lifted its right arm, if the concepts of right and left even applied to something like this, and extended one finger, pointing at Daniel's chest, at his heart. Then it spoke. Not with a voice, not with sound. The words simply appeared in Daniel's head, complete and terrible. "I've been waiting for you." Daniel screamed. The sound tore out of him raw and primal. The scream of every nightmare he'd ever had, compressed into one sustained note of pure terror. He screamed until his broken ribs ground against each other, and the pain made him choke until his throat was raw, until the lights came on. Fluorescent glare flooded the room, banishing shadows. Daniel squinted against the brightness, his scream dying to a whimper. Claire stood in the doorway, hand on the light switch, eyes wide. "Daniel, what's wrong? I heard you." She stopped taking in the scene. The wet sheets, his tear-streaked face, the wild terror in his eyes. "The corner," Daniel gasped, pointing with his good hand. "In the corner, there's something." Claire looked. Daniel looked with her, following her gaze to the northeast corner. Empty. Just beige walls meeting at a standard 90-degree angle. No figure, no darkness, nothing. "It was there," Daniel insisted. "It was right there. 7 feet tall, dark, it was watching me. And it spoke to me, and okay. Claire crossed to his bed, her nurse voice kicking in. Calm, professional soothing. "You're okay. You're safe. This happens sometimes with head injuries and pain medication. The combination can cause very vivid hallucinations." It wasn't a hallucination. "I believe that it felt real to you." She was checking his vitals now, her fingers on his wrist, counting his pulse. "Your heart rate is through the roof, 140, way too high, and you're hyperventilating. I need you to try to slow your breathing for me, okay? In through your nose, out through your mouth." Daniel tried, failed, tried again. His breath came in ragged gasps. "I'm going to increase your anti-anxiety medication," Claire said, already adjusting his IV. "And I'll call the doctor about reducing your pain meds if they're causing these kinds of reactions. In the meantime, I'm going to stay right here until you feel calmer. Okay." She pulled up the visitor's chair and sat down, her presence solid and real and human. Daniel focused on her face, on the gentle concern in her eyes, on the way her fingers tapped rhythmically on the chair arm, a nervous habit. Something wonderfully mundanely normal. The panic began to recede, slightly. His breathing slowed. His heart rate dropped to something closer to survivable. "Better?" Claire asked. Daniel nodded. Didn't trust his voice. "I'm so sorry I took so long to check on you," she said. "We had an emergency on 3. Coding patient. All hands on deck. I should have had someone cover my other rooms, but it was chaos." "It's okay," Daniel managed. His throat felt like he'd swallowed broken glass. "Let me get you some ice chips, and we need to change these sheets. Can you tolerate being moved?" He nodded again. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of gentle repositioning, clean sheets, ice chips that felt like heaven on his destroyed throat. Claire talked the entire time, her voice a steady stream of normalcy. Her kids' soccer practice, the cafeteria's questionable meatloaf, the upcoming hospital Halloween party. By the time she finished, Daniel felt almost human again. The terror had faded to a dull unease. The thing in the corner was gone, had never been there. hallucination. Had to be. I'm going to keep the lights on for you, Claire said. And I'll check in every hour until morning shift. Sound good? Yeah, thank you. She squeezed his shoulder gently, carefully, avoiding the injuries. Try to get some rest. You're going to be okay, Daniel. She left, pulling the door partially closed behind her. Daniel lay in the bright fluorescent light, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince himself she was right. He didn't look at the corners, especially not the northeast corner. If he looked, he might see the shadow that had returned the moment the door closed, might see it standing exactly where it had been before. Tilted, arm raised, finger pointing. Might hear the words in his head again. I've been waiting for you. But Daniel didn't look. He kept his eyes on the ceiling and counted the tiles until exhaustion and medication finally dragged him into something resembling sleep. Morning came with the bustle of shift change and breakfast trays. Daniel woke disoriented, the night's terror feeling distant and dreamlike in the harsh daylight streaming through his window. Dr. Patel made rounds at 7:30, accompanied by a resident, whose name Daniel immediately forgot. They discussed his progress, his pain levels, his mobility. The conversation was clinical, focused on broken bones and healing timelines. No one mentioned hallucinations or things in corners. Claire had left a note in his chart about the incident, but Dr. Patel seemed unconcerned. Morphine can cause some pretty vivid experiences, he said, making notes on his tablet. We'll adjust your dosage, switch you to a different pain management protocol. You should feel clearer-headed within 24 hours. Daniel wanted to believe him, wanted the explanation to be that simple. But when the doctors left and he was alone again, he couldn't stop himself from looking at the northeast corner. Empty in the daylight. Just walls and shadow and the normal darkness that accumulated in spaces light didn't quite reach. But watching it, Daniel noticed something he'd missed last night. There were marks on the wall. Faint, barely visible. Like someone had scraped fingernails down the paint, leaving thin, parallel scratches. 4 of them, going from about 7 feet high down to the floor. Daniel stared at the marks until his vision blurred. The day nurse Brenda, older than Claire, brisk and efficient, came in to check vitals. Daniel asked her about the scratches. "What scratches, hun?" He pointed. "On that wall, 4 lines, like someone scratched the paint." Brenda squinted at the corner, then shrugged. "I don't see anything. But these rooms get pretty beat up over the years. We repaint every couple years, but damage shows through sometimes." She didn't see them. Daniel saw them clear as day, but she didn't see them at all. He decided not to push it. His mother visited at lunch, bringing him smuggled-in food from his favorite Thai place. She chattered about family gossip, about his father's latest project at work, about his cousin's new baby. Normal things. Safe things. Daniel tried to engage, tried to be present, but his attention kept drifting to the corner. In the daylight, with his mother's voice filling the room, it seemed impossible that anything could have been there last night. Ridiculous. His brain playing tricks. But the scratches were still there. After his mother left, Daniel spent the afternoon watching TV with the volume turned up loud enough to annoy himself. Anything to fill the silence. Game shows, news, a cooking competition. He didn't care what it was, as long as it made noise. Brenda checked on him every few hours. Everything was normal. Vitals stable. Pain manageable. healing progressing as expected. The sun set around 6 p.m. The room's shadows lengthened. Daniel turned on every light he could reach. The overhead fluorescents, the bedside lamp, the bathroom light leaving that door open. The TV stayed on volume high. He would not spend another night in darkness. Claire arrived for the night shift at 7 p.m., poking her head in to check on him. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Better. The new pain meds are good. Clearer head. No more visitors." She glanced meaningfully at the corner. "No, it was just the medication." "Good. That's good." But something in her expression suggested she didn't entirely believe him. "I'm here all night if you need anything. And I mean anything, Daniel. Don't hesitate to call." "I won't." She left and Daniel was alone again. He kept his eyes on the TV, a sitcom he'd seen before. Then a drama. Then the news. He didn't process any of it. Just let the sounds and lights wash over him, a barrier against the dark. At 10 p.m., Brenda's replacement, a male nurse named Marcus, came to administer medication. Young guy, athletic build, friendly smile. "Heard you had a rough night yesterday," Marcus said as he checked the IV. "Yeah, hallucinations. That'll happen with the strong stuff. You should be better now, though. New protocol. Let me know if you feel weird, okay?" "Will do." Marcus left. Daniel was alone. 11 p.m. came and went. Then midnight. Daniel fought sleep, afraid of what might happen if he closed his eyes. Afraid of what might be waiting in the corner when he opened them again. But exhaustion is a patient predator, and pain medication makes terrible armor against it. At 12:47 a.m., Daniel's eyes closed. At 12:48 a.m., all the lights in his room went out. Not just turned off. Out. Like something had severed the power completely. The overhead fluorescents, the bedside lamp, the bathroom light, all dead. Even the TV went black, its electronic hum dying to nothing. The only light came from the street lamps in the parking garage, filtering weakly through the blinds, throwing long shadows across the room. Daniel's eyes snapped open. His heart kicked into overdrive. The corner was no longer empty. The figure stood exactly where it had the previous night, but this time it wasn't alone. There were 3 of them. 3 shadow figures, all identical in their wrongness, all standing perfectly still, all with their heads tilted at that impossible angle, all watching him. Daniel couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, couldn't move. The center figure raised its arm, finger pointing at Daniel's chest. "We've been waiting for you," the voice said in his head. Not one voice. 3, speaking in perfect unison. So long, so very long. The figures on either side raised their arms too. 6 hands now, all pointing, all focused on Daniel like he was the most important thing in the universe. "Almost time," they said together. The center figure took a step forward, then another, moving with that liquid smoothness like it was floating rather than walking. The other 2 followed. Step, step, step. They moved in perfect synchronization, a grotesque choreography crossing the room toward Daniel's bed. Daniel's paralysis broke. He lunged for the call button, slamming his thumb down on it, repeatedly, ignoring the screaming pain in his broken wrist from the movement. No one came. The figures kept walking. 5 feet away, 4. Daniel grabbed the water pitcher from his bedside table with his good hand and hurled it at them. It passed through the center figure like it wasn't there, hit the wall behind it, shattered. 3 feet away. Daniel could smell them now. Not rot, not death. Nothing that straightforward. They smelled like absence, like the smell of a room after someone you love has died in it. Empty, cold, final, 2 feet. The center figure reached out with both hands, now fingers spreading wide, reaching for Daniel's face. Time to come home, it said. Daniel screamed, and the door burst open. Light flooded in from the hallway. The hallway lights still worked, and Marcus rushed in. Daniel, what's oh shit? The power's out in here. Hold on. He pulled out his phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam swept across the room. The figures were gone. There were 3 of them, Daniel gasped. 3. They were right there. They were reaching for me and... Hey, it's okay. Just another hallucination. Dr. Patel said this might happen during the transition period. Marcus was checking the light switches, frowning when none responded. That's weird. Everything else on the floor is fine. Must be a breaker issue. Let me call maintenance. It wasn't a hallucination. I know it felt real. Marcus was using that same careful nurse voice Claire had used. But I promise you, there's no one here but us. Look around. You can see the whole room with my phone light. Daniel looked. Marcus was right. The room was empty except for the 2 of them, but the scratches on the wall had multiplied. Where there had been 4 parallel lines, there were now 12. 3 sets of 4, and they went all the way from the 7-foot mark down to the baseboard, as if 3 tall figures had slowly dragged their fingers down the wall. Do you see those? Daniel pointed with his good hand. Marcus looked, squinted. See what? The scratches on that wall. I mean, the paint's kind of messed up there, but I don't see any scratches. He walked over, examined the wall more closely, ran his hand over it. Feels smooth to me. Daniel wanted to scream, wanted to grab Marcus and shake him and make him see, but he didn't, because a terrible thought was creeping into his mind. What if he was the only one who could see them? What if the figures and the scratches were visible only to him? What did that mean? I'm going to call maintenance about the power, Marcus said. And I'll stay with you until they get it fixed, okay? You shouldn't have to sit in the dark. Thank you. Marcus stepped into the hallway to make the call, leaving his phone on the bedside table so Daniel would have light. Alone again, Daniel stared at the corner. The figures were back. Not moving, not approaching. Just standing there, watching their heads tilted, their arms raised and pointing. Waiting. Almost time, they whispered in his mind. Almost time to come home. And Daniel realized with creeping horror that home didn't mean his apartment in the Pearl District. Didn't mean any place he'd ever been. It meant the corner. It meant the dark space between walls where they waited. It meant wherever they came from. They wanted to take him there, and they believed with absolute certainty that soon they would succeed. Maintenance fixed the power in 20 minutes. Marcus stayed with Daniel until it was done chatting about inconsequential things, his presence a fragile barrier against the dark. But when the lights came on, Daniel saw what Marcus couldn't. The figures didn't leave. They just became harder to see, their forms translucent in the artificial light, but still there, still watching, still pointing. They'd stopped hiding. Marcus left around 2 a.m., promising to check back in an hour. The moment the door closed, the figures solidified again, becoming as real and terrible as they'd ever been. But Daniel didn't scream this time. Terror had exhausted itself into a kind of numb acceptance. They were there. He could see them. No one else could. And they were getting closer each time. That was the pattern Daniel realized. Each night they came closer. Last night they'd stood in the corner. Tonight they'd crossed the room, had gotten within touching distance before Marcus interrupted. Tomorrow, if there was a tomorrow, they'd reach him, would touch him with those wrong hands, would take him to wherever home was. Daniel couldn't let that happen. He spent the next hour forming a plan. It was insane, would probably kill him, but dying of his injuries seemed preferable to whatever waited in that corner. At 3:15 a.m., Daniel removed his IV. The needle pulling free from his arm sent a spike of pain through him, but it was manageable compared to everything else. Blood welled up from the insertion site. He pressed a tissue against it. Then, moving with agonizing slowness, he maneuvered his broken body to the edge of the bed. Every movement was torture. His broken ribs screamed. His shattered femur sent bolts of white-hot agony up his spine. His fractured skull throbbed in time with his heartbeat. But he kept moving. The three figures watched, heads tilted, but made no move to stop him. Maybe they were curious. Maybe they knew he couldn't escape. Maybe they simply didn't care. Daniel got his working leg over the side of the bed, planted his foot on the cold linoleum, used his good arm to lever himself upright. The world spun, nausea surged. He bit down on his tongue to keep from vomiting. When the room stabilized, he was standing. Sort of. Leaning heavily on the bed rail, his broken leg dangling useless but vertical, the figures were 10 feet away. Watching. Don't they said in his mind, stay. Almost time. Almost home. Fuck you, Daniel whispered. He grabbed the IV pole for support. It was on wheels, could serve as a makeshift walker, and took his first step toward the door. Pain exploded through his right leg as the broken femur tried to bear weight. He screamed through clenched teeth but kept moving. Step, scream, step, scream. The figures didn't move, just watched. Daniel made it 3 feet before his leg gave out entirely. He collapsed the IV pole, clattering down with him, his body hitting the linoleum with a wet crunch that meant something else had just broken. He lay there, gasping, blood seeping from somewhere he couldn't tell where anymore. His whole body was pain, and realized he'd failed. He wasn't getting out of this room. The three figures walked toward him, slow, deliberate in that perfect synchronization. They stood over him, looking down, their heads tilted. Home, they said, and they reached down. 6 hands grabbed him. Their touch was ice cold, burning cold, the cold of absolute zero and the space between stars. Where they gripped him, his shoulders, his arms, his chest. The cold sank through skin and muscle and bone all the way down to something deeper than physical matter. They were grabbing his soul. Daniel felt it being pulled, disconnected from his body, drawn upward like water through a straw. He watched from a perspective that was simultaneously inside and outside his body as his own form grew pale and still on the hospital floor. The figures pulled, and Daniel came free of his flesh like a hand pulling out of a glove. He was weightless now, painless. The agony of his broken body was gone because he wasn't in it anymore. He was somewhere else, somewhere above, looking down at the empty shell that had been Daniel Reeves. Home, the figures said, again, their voices clearer now that he was like them. They turned, still holding him, and began walking toward the corner. Daniel tried to resist, tried to pull away, but he had no leverage, no strength. They were so much stronger, and they'd been waiting so long. They reached the corner, that northeast corner where the walls met, and kept walking. Into the wall, through it, into the dark space beyond. And Daniel saw. The corner wasn't a corner. It was a threshold, a doorway to somewhere else, somewhere vast and empty and cold, where things like this three waited in endless patience for people like Daniel. Not everyone. Only certain people. Only those who'd been marked, somehow chosen, somehow noticed by the things that lived in the spaces between. How had Daniel been marked? He'd never know. Maybe the accident had cracked something in him that let them in. Maybe they'd been watching him his whole life, waiting for the right moment. Maybe it was random, meaningless, and he was simply unlucky. It didn't matter. They pulled him through. The hospital room disappeared. His body on the floor disappeared. Everything disappeared except the dark and the cold and the endless waiting. Home, the figures said, and finally Daniel understood. This was where they'd been all along. Not in the corner, not in the room. They lived here in this space between spaces, and the corner had just been a window through which they could reach, and now he was here with them. Other figures emerged from the dark. Dozens. Hundreds. All the same, all wrong. All watching with heads tilted and arms raised. One of us, they said in unison. Finally. One of us. And Daniel felt himself changing. Felt his form becoming like theirs. Felt his head tilting at that impossible angle. Felt his arms raising to point at nothing. Felt himself becoming shadow and absence and patient waiting. He tried to scream but had no mouth, tried to run but had no legs, tried to die but was already dead. All he could do was wait, wait and watch, watch and wait for the next one, for the next marked person who would see him in their corner, watching, pointing patient, for the next one to bring home. They found Daniel's body at 3:47 a.m. when Claire came to check on him. He'd pulled out his IV and fallen trying to reach the door. The impact had fractured his other femur and caused fatal internal bleeding. He'd bled out on the linoleum floor of room 447 while trying to escape something only he could see. That's what the incident report said. That's what the autopsy concluded. Traumatic brain injury, pain medication, post-accident psychosis. He'd hallucinated a threat, panicked, injured himself further in an attempt to flee. A tragic outcome, but not uncommon with severe head trauma patients. The hospital reviewed Claire's notes, Marcus's statements, the medication protocols, found no negligence, no malpractice. Just a terrible confluence of injuries and delusions. Daniel's parents sued anyway. The case settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. Room 447 was deep cleaned and repainted. The scratches on the northeast wall were covered with fresh primer and paint, 2 coats. 3 weeks later, a new patient was admitted to room 447. Elderly woman, hip replacement, expected to be mobile within days. She complained to the nurses about shadows in the corner, about feeling watched. The staff assured her it was just the medication, just the disorientation of a new environment. On her 3rd night in the room, she pressed the call button and didn't get a response. She was found the next morning lying at the base of the northeast wall, her fingers bloody from scratching at the paint. 4 long parallel scratches going from shoulder height to the floor. Cause of death, cardiac arrest. Brought on by extreme terror, the medical examiner noted, though, terror of what remained unclear. Room 447 was closed for a week, investigated, cleaned again, repainted again, then reopened. Because hospitals need rooms and patients need beds, and one room's tragic history doesn't change those facts. The scratches always came back. Different patients, different timelines, but always the same scratches, always the same corner. The staff learned not to put patients there who had head injuries or were on strong pain medications. Learned not to leave people alone in that room between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m. Most importantly, they learned never to look too long at the northeast corner. Because if you looked long enough, if you really paid attention, you could see them. Shadows standing where shadows shouldn't be able to stand. Patient. Watching. Waiting. Their heads tilted at impossible angles, their arms raised, pointing, waiting for the next one who could see them, the next one marked, the next one to bring home. 6 months after Daniel's death, his college roommate Jake received a package. It had no return address, just Jake's name and address printed on a plain white label. Inside was a flash drive and a note in Daniel's handwriting. Jake, if you're reading this, I'm dead. I set up a dead man's switch. If I don't cancel it every week, it sends this automatically. Don't watch the video unless you're ready. Don't watch it alone. Don't watch it at night. And whatever you do, don't watch it in a room with corners you can't see into. D. Jake sat in his Austin apartment, turning the flash drive over in his hands. It was a Saturday afternoon, sunlight streaming through the windows. His girlfriend was out shopping. He was alone. He'd meant to wait, meant to follow Daniel's instructions. But grief and curiosity made poor companions, and Jake had never been good at following rules. He plugged the drive into his laptop. One file. Video. Recorded October 14th, 2019 at 11:47 p.m. Daniel's face filled the screen, pale and drawn hospital gown visible at the bottom of frame. He was holding his phone up, filming himself, and behind him, Jake could see the beige walls of a hospital room. "I don't have much time," Daniel said on the recording. "They're coming back soon. They come every night now. Started 3 nights ago. I thought I was hallucinating, but I'm not. They're real, and they can be recorded." He turned the phone, panning across the room. Jake leaned closer to the screen. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Just a hospital room, a window, a TV, medical equipment. Then Daniel panned to the northeast corner, and Jake's blood went cold. 3 figures stood there, dark, motionless. Their heads tilted at angles that made Jake's neck hurt to look at. Their arms raised, pointing at the camera, at Daniel. They turned. All three of them, in perfect synchronization, turned to face the camera. Turned to face Daniel's phone. Turned to face Jake watching the video 6 months later in his Austin apartment, and pointed at him. "Can you see them?" Daniel's voice came from the recording, shaking. "If you can see them, Jake, I'm so sorry. That means they've marked you too. That means they're already in your corner. That means..." The video cut off. Jake sat frozen, staring at the black screen of his laptop. Then very slowly, he turned his head to look at the corner of his living room. The corner behind his couch. The corner where the afternoon sunlight didn't quite reach. Empty. Just walls and shadows. Not empty. Something was there. Tall, dark, watching. Its head tilted, its arm raised, pointing. "We've been waiting for you," it said in his mind. Jake's laptop screen flickered back to life. Not the video anymore, just static. And in the static, words appeared, marked. "Scene, almost time, almost home." Jake ran, grabbed his car keys. His wallet didn't even close his laptop. Just ran out of his apartment and down the stairs and into the parking lot and drove. He drove for 6 hours before he had to stop, exhausted and terrified. Pulled into a highway rest stop somewhere in West Texas. Went into the bathroom to splash water on his face. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The tile floor was cracked and dirty. The bathroom smelled like industrial cleaner and urine. Jake bent over the sink, breathing hard, trying to convince himself it had been a trick. Video editing. Daniel's idea of a sick joke before he died. He looked up into the mirror. Behind him in the reflection, standing in the corner of the bathroom stall, it was there. Watching. Home, it said. Jake's scream echoed off the tile walls, but no one came. The rest stop was empty. Had been empty all along. Just Jake. And the thing in the corner. The thing that had been waiting. The thing that would keep waiting, following, watching, patient, beyond human comprehension, until the moment came. Until it was time. Until Jake came home.